So let's get started setting up the development environment that we're going to be using this first week. Most of it's going to be the same for the next 3 or 4 weeks. We're going to keep the same middle tier, the same database for the next 3 or 4 weeks. But the front end is going to change a little bit. Right? This first week we're going to do jQuery, JavaScript, HTML, no framework on the front end. Just plain old bare bones JavaScript and jQuery. But we will keep the middle tier and the database for the next 3 or 4 weeks. Okay. So this first lesson here is going to focus on setting up the development environment, the middle tier, where we're going to be hosting our web application. Okay. As the middle tier, we're going to be using Spring Boot. Spring Boot is an easier version of Spring MVC. Anyone played around with Spring MVC? You done it in a co-op or not? Okay. So Spring MVC is fairly challenging. Spring Boot has a lot of pre-configured environments that so you don't have to do everything from scratch, and it's very easy to get started on a web application. Also, we're going to be hosting this middle tier, this server. We're going to be hosting it on Heroku. It's an easier version of AWS. They do host all their content on AWS, but their front end and their management is a little bit easier a slower, easier learning curve. So there's a couple of things that we assume that you have already installed. We assume that you have already created an account on Heroku.com. It's free. I encourage you to head there and create an account here on Heroku. I'm already logged in, so it'll kick me into my dashboard. But create an account. If you prefer AWS, if you've done AWS in other courses, feel free to use AWS as well. The TAs should be able to support you on either Heroku or AWS. Okay? Although AWS is slightly more involved and a slightly higher learning curve. We also assume that you have downloaded and installed the command line interface from Heroku. We gave you a link to do that last time, but if you haven't yet, the setup development environment web dev presentation walks you through some of these steps. For instance, it assumes that you have already installed JDK 8, that you have downloaded Maven. We don't need Maven just yet. But we'll need it perhaps next week. So get going and install that if you don't already have it. I recognize some of you here that have taken previous courses, so I'm sure you should have it on your machines. You already have an account on Heroku. Here's a link to an article on how to install the development environment on Heroku. If you go there, it'll walk you through downloading the command line interface, which I already have, and you can download it for Mac OS, Windows, Ubuntu, or many other operating systems. Right? It's an easy install. You just accept the defaults and whatnot. So we assume that you already have that. It also assumes that you have installed the Spring command line interface. Right? This is also the setting up environment walks you through doing that as well. If you go to this link, it walks you through installing it. Or if you have a Mac, you can just brew. You say brew install Spring Boot. Okay, that will install the Spring Boot command line interface. If you don't have a brew, you can do a curl to this URL, and it'll download and install the Spring Boot CLI. We also assume that you've downloaded MySQL Workbench, that you have it locally. We'll use it to connect to the database to create tables, insert data, retrieve data. And you also have an account on GitHub, or do you have a GitHub account on the school's GitHub? Although I guess someone mentioned yesterday that GitHub, the school's GitHub, does not allow you to invite others as collaborators. I need to verify that. If that's true, then we'll need to stick to just plain old GitHub.com. Anyway, if we have all those tools installed in on our machine, we can get started. If we have Spring Boot CLI installed, we can just type Spring init -- dependencies equal web app, and that will create a Spring application on your machine. So let's do that. So let's see. Let's let's see. Let's choose a location where to do all our work this semester. Let's see. We have there we go. So we have Genoozy WebDev 2018. That looks like a proper place to start. And in here, we'll create. Oops. We'll copy Spring init and dependencies. It'll create a directory called my app. Right, and that's where it'll install all your web application. I'll choose a better name for this, since this is going to be the server, the middle tier. Yes.
Make the text a little bigger.
Sure. Yep. So yeah, so let's we'll do that, and we'll choose a better name for the name. So we'll choose maybe I'll call it WebDev. Summer 1, 2018. So we'll create this application, this Spring application, and it's in that directory. We can go in there. We're going to go into that directory. Let's see, WebDev. Right now it's a working project already. We can start it and get it going, but it's not yet a web application. There's no place for us to place any web content, right? So let's create a directory where we can put all our publicly available content, right? You can call it different ways. A common way to call it in Spring Boot is just a web app. Okay, so let's do that. And we have here instructions to do that. So we're going to go into that directory. In there right now we have Java and resources. All Java content is going to go under Java. Resources are property files or XML files or configuration files will go under there. So let's create the web directory where we can put some HTML content in there. So we'll create web app and going there. And let's create just a dummy HTML file for now, right? That we can test to see that this is working. So let's see, where are we? We are in web app, and let's cat into index.html. So this is the index file, right? That is sitting at the root of the web application, right? So this is going to be mapped to just whatever the context is, whatever the URL is, / right? So the very top of the web application. So let's type in here and we'll say this is the welcome to the simplest Spring Boot web app. So we have our index page in there. So we're ready to hit to start this off. And we want to deploy this. We want to make sure that we can deploy this to Heroku. So that's already deployed on a remote server. We can run it locally, certainly, right? But let's deploy it on a remote server. And to deploy it on the remote server, assuming that you've already created an account on Heroku, you've already installed the Heroku command line interface. It's fairly simple. The only thing you need to do is to create a local repository, a local Git repository, commit your source code to the repository, and push to the Heroku repository, the remote GitHub repository on Heroku. All right, so let's do that. Let's create a local repository, Git init, and let's add all the content. Oh, that's not where I wanted it. That is not where I wanted it. Where are we? Let's see, WebDev 2018. Is that where? Isn't that where I put it? Januzi, webdev. I'm just going to move that to the trash. I don't want that there. Actually, I want it at the top. Git init. And we're going to add everything. Notice that there's a git ignore in there. See that? That git ignore makes sure that we're not going to be putting into our Git repository any libraries, any jar files, any compiled classes, any .class, anything that can be recreated, things that can be generated on the fly. That should never go on a repository. We only want source code. All right. So if we take a look at that. This already has some things that our Git repository is going to ignore. Right? It's going to ignore anything that's under the build directory, under the distribution directory, anything that ends with IWS, IML, IPR, anything that ends with that class path, anything that ends with jar files. So there's tons of already set up Git ignore, right? That makes sure that we're not going to put in there things that we don't really care about. Okay. So let's add everything. Except what's in Git ignore. All right. Yes.
Was it generated automatically by Spring Boot?
Yes. Spring Boot generates all that. It knows that this is a Java project. That IDEs will generate all sorts of configuration files. So, for instance, it generated this IntelliJ set of files that ignore any IntelliJ related files. We don't want it in source code. Only Java, only .html, .css. So we put here things that we don't want. All right, so we have that, and we're ready to commit. So we'll commit our first word. So git commit first commit. We've committed it, and we're ready to push it to Heroku. So first, we're going to have to log into Heroku if you're not already logged in. So Heroku login. Januzi@gmail. All right, so we're logged into Heroku, and we can do a Heroku.create. Now, Heroku create is a command that will work certainly for Spring Boot, but it will work with any number of other frameworks, right? It parses the contents of the directory. It realizes that it's a Spring Boot application and says, oh, okay, I need to create a Java web application, right? Because you're ready to deploy a Java-based web application. If this were a Node.js web application, would have created a Node.js-based project to deploy to Heroku. So it's a smart command, right? That it behaves differently depending on the framework that you're using as a middle tier. Okay. So this one created for us a dummy application with a random name. Notice that it chose for us. It grabbed some 3 random tokens. Lit dash retreat dash. And then this random number, right? Because tons of people are deploying to Heroku. They don't want to crash into anybody else's name. They want to make sure that it's unique, and that's where it's going to be available. You can change this name, and we'll change it in a minute. But this is the random one that comes that it selects for us. All right, so we're ready to deploy. So to deploy, it's as easy as pushing to Heroku's Git our master branch. Okay, we'll push our master branch to the Heroku remote. Notice that when we created it, it also created it created for us, the create command created these Git remote repositories for fetch and push, right? So be able to push and fetch a repository to this Git. Notice that it's a git.heroku.com, right? It's a repository that they have, right? And they named it Heroku. So you can say git push to Heroku, and then whatever branch you want to push it there, right? And once you push it, it restarts the server, it redeploys, repackages, right? And then it restarts the server for us. So we're ready to push this, and we can say git push to Heroku our master branch. So that's going to push, and it's going to take a bit. Right? It detects that this is a Java application. It compiles, it packages, it deploys, it downloads any dependencies. It looks at the a POM file, a pom.xml file that declares all the dependencies that our Java project has, right, or the libraries that it might need, and it says that it was successful. Okay. All right, so it's running, and we can open it up here. We can say Heroku open while I'm in the directory. Of our application. So in a minute, hopefully this will say that this is the simplest Spring Boot application in Heroku. Yes? No? Maybe it's not. It's taking a while. All right. Meanwhile, okay, there it is. Okay, there we go. All right. So this is the simplest Spring Boot application. Notice that it's running remotely on the server under lit-retreat- and that number. We can change the name to something more reasonable using the Heroku apps rename, right? And we can give it our brand new name. Right? So for instance, webdev summer 1 2018. Hopefully none of you have already renamed it to that. Otherwise, I won't be able to use it. So we'll do this. We'll copy and rename it. Oops, copy. So it will rename. Notice that now it should be deployed to, instead of that random name, it's now deployed to webdev-summer1-2018.heroku. Okay. If that would have been already taken, it would have said, sorry, that name is already taken. Try something else. Right? Like, for instance, you won't be able to use it now. All right? You'll need to use something else. Perhaps you can put your first name and last name there, or some random token. I believe there's a limitation of up to 30 characters. The name cannot be longer than 30 characters. So you'll need to be creative. Yes?
So I have Windows, and I'm trying to create an index.html, but it's keep the same, giving error.
Are you using cat?
Yes.
Yeah, there's no cat on a Windows. You need you would need some text notepad. You can use just Notepad for now.
Okay.
Or you could use STS, as we'll do in a second.
Okay.
Let's do that. Let's notice that this is running remote. Let me run it again. So let's do a Heroku open again. Heroku open, and there it is. So it's deployed, but the name changed. See that? It's now called webdev-summer1-2018. Okay, and that's mine. Right? The one that doesn't have any last name is mine. Yours will have something else. All right, so this is executing remotely on a remote server. But as you're developing, as you're working and working on your assignments, typically you'll be working locally on your machine once you feel comfortable after having had a long day working on this. You've been committing many times over. You will go ahead and commit and push this over to Heroku and deploy it remotely. But typically you'll be doing everything locally on your machine as a matter of course. So let's do that. Let's open that application locally. Sometimes when you change a name, sometimes it has happened to me that the remote, if you do a git remote-v, sometimes this doesn't change, right? And it's still pointing to the old random name. Okay, this works properly now, but sometimes it doesn't. I'm not sure why. This would still said lit dash what was it, retreat something or other. So you would need to get in there and change it yourself. Okay, so I have just a quick slide on that that you might need to change it. All right, and you would need to change inside of the Git repository. There's a git config that points to where the remote is. So let's just real quick, we can look at that git config, and you would change it here. You would change this URL. You would change it to the correct remote. All right, unless you know your git remote commands, you can do it from the command line as well. or you can change it here at the configuration. Okay. All right. So there we have it. So we have it. We have already something deployed, running remotely on Heroku. It's actually listed there. If you've opened up an account there and you go to your dashboard, it should be listed there. Let's see, web dev spring. Oh, summer. There it is. So summer 1, 2018. There it is. So it's listed in my dashboard. All of my applications are listed there. If I click on it, it'll tell me all sorts of information about it. Where it's deployed. If we click on deployed, it says that this is deployed. How is it deployed? And you can't see it here, but this is actually selected, saying that it's deployed to the Heroku Git. You can actually deploy to a normal GitHub repository and then point to it. So every time you deploy, you commit to your GitHub repository, it automatically recompiles packages and deploys. But for now, let's just keep the Heroku Git. That's fine for now, and we'll revisit this in a minute. So it's there. It's the dashboard. We see that it's been deployed. So let's now that we know that it's running remotely on a server, let's now open it up locally so that we can work on it on a local machine. And to do that, we're going to be using STS or Spring Tool Suite, which is basically just an Eclipse that has been enhanced with some tooling to be specific for Spring Boot. Okay. So which I already have installed, STS, and I already have something running locally. Let me stop this, and let me close these. Let's see. So once you have STS running, let me close this. Once you have STS running, you can import. The project we just created, right? You can say import. And we can navigate. It'll be an existing Maven project, right? An existing Maven project. If you look at the list, notice that there's a POM file in there. See that POM.xml, right? That's a project object model that describes our project. It's a common way of describing Maven projects that use the Maven build tool, right? So for instance, if we open that up. We'll see that there's a lot of dependency that says that for this project to work, we need all these other things to work as well. Right? We need the Spring Boot framework. We might need all sorts of database connections. We might need all sorts of other dependencies. The POM file describes all dependencies of our project with other things. And we'll open it up in a minute and take a look at it. But that's how we know that it's a Maven project. It has a POM file. Okay. All right. So. Let's open it. So it says an existing Maven project. We say next. We browse to location, and I believe it's in. I think we put it under Jen Nunzi, webdev, 2018, and there it is. Webdev Summer 1. Open. It lists it. Says I identify the POM file, pom.xml. Very good. I'm going to say finish. It adds it, and there it is. Webdev Summer 1. Okay. You'll see that here's our web app directory with our index file, and here's where you could edit it. Right? You can create new XML files, HTML, JavaScript, CSS. We'll be doing this in the IDE. Right? I don't particularly like the STS Eclipse IDE. Instead we'll use an IntelliJ version of this. But for Java, it's great. So we'll be doing the server side development here in Eclipse, but we'll be doing more of the front end development. We're going to be doing on using IntelliJ. Has a much better support for JavaScript, HTML, and whatnot. Actually, it also has better support for Java. We might just stick to IntelliJ all the way through. Anyway, so that's our index page. There it is. Welcome to the simplest Spring Boot, and we can edit it here. All right, so now let's see. Typically, we would be doing our development here, not remotely. At the end of the day, when we're done, we would push everything to Heroku, and then we would have everything synchronized, right? So what we have locally, eventually will end up in the remote server, and you should get into that cadence, right? At you work a couple hours perhaps during the day, doing everything locally. Once you feel confident, you commit and you push to Heroku, and it gets deployed to the remote server. Okay. When you're confident that you have a stable working environment, don't push anything that breaks anything remotely, right? All right. So let's see. So locally, to run it locally, notice that it created for us this class, and in Java, this is a main class, right? Notice that it's an executable class, right? It can be executed using Java space and then the name of the class, right? And that's exactly how we're going to start the application. This is one of the conveniences that Spring Boot introduces, is that a web application is just as simple as running this main class. It creates it for you. It's already configured. You don't have to do anything. We only had to really create that HTML file, and we're done. If this instead were just plain old MVC, Spring MVC, there's quite a lot of homework that has to be done to set this up. Right? Spring Boot already comes with all those things configured for us, which is very, very convenient. Anyway, so to run this locally, all we have to do is just run this one main file, main class file. Maybe change the name for. So we'll run it. We'll say run as just a plain old Java application. It compiles, packages, deploys, and starts up a local Tomcat server. And I believe it's already running. And it's listening at port 8080. Okay, locally on our machine. So so that's running remotely. And this is running locally, localhost 8080. Oh, nope. There it is. So this is local and this is remote. Right? So they're identical. Right? So this is local, remote. Right? So ideally what you would do is that, again, you work on this locally throughout the day, and then you push at the end of the day. All right? Everybody okay? Everyone still with me? All right. So we have a working server deployed on Heroku. So the intention would be that by next Monday you would have such server running on Heroku with the assignment all done. Right? Awesome. Let's see what else. We deployed. So the next step would be to add a database. All right. So let's do that next.